Postmodernism. Movement in philosophy during 1960s. That pushed the Enlightenment paradigm into an exact opposite. Intellectual trends in the 20th century inhere from the Enlightenment. Two-level theory. Manifest image, of things as they appear to us. Scientific image, a hidden level which explains the behavior of things, at the manifest level. So, the objects of the manifest image of life. The things we experience, including ourselves, are actually in some sense fictions. Everything on that level is determined by something happening at a hidden level. That hidden level may vary. According to Enlightenment materialism, it's just the realm of microparticles that are governed by physical law. Evolutionary theory, random mutation, natural selection, ultimately, unified with genetic theory, so it becomes a modern evolutionary biology. Freudian psychology, something at the subconscious levels that's driving everything. Nietzsche, will to power. In the 1960s this turned into structuralism and post-structuralism. The idea that things are determined by social structures. By Marx, talks about economic classes, an underlying economic level. The structuralist extends that to a general social level. They were primarily anthropologists. Claude Lévi-Strauss. He said there are certain social structures, which determine the roles that we play and what we do. Manifest image. Surface. We think of ourselves as free. We think as acting for reasons. As having responsibility. As acting rightly or wrongly. Scientific image. The hidden level that determines what we do. So, we aren't really free. We're determined by factors what we're not even aware of. Moreover, since that's true, we have no responsibility, so our reasons are just mere rationalizations, they have nothing to do with the cause of our actual behave. This was connected with four pieces of the Enlightenment. Truth. Universal and absolute truths. E.g. the laws discovered in the scientific revolution. Knowledge. It's possible to attain an objective knowledge. Reason. The best way to do that is to use reason on the basis of experience. Progress. To leading to human progress. To achieve progress, you need to determine these universal and absolute truths. By the use of reason and attain objective knowledge. All these, end up denied by the postmodernist. Gained popularity in academic journals around the 80s and peaked in 1997. But the popular journals, took it off around 1997. Postmodernism. It's something that breaks sharply with the past. Takes elements from the past without endorsing them. Dealing with them ironically. Artworks, philosophy, literature. They're taking themes and play with them. They are trying to put them into practice. Nietzsche's idea of the playful science. Something that involves going beyond the search for truth and doing something else. Where the postmodernist is coming from. Hegel. The myth of the given. He attacks this idea of immediacy. Of there being a direct relation between us and the world. It seems as if there is that sort of direct relation. But Hegel says, thought and language don't relate to the world directly in that way. Things are not directly linked. Because in between are concepts. If you think about what's going on in your perception. What are you really perceiving? Caught in a section of the Critique of Pure Reason, elaborated in great detail. And says, there's an act of synthesis going on. In fact, 3 acts of synthesis. In the first level. Your eye is taking a bunch of very complex and highly varied color patterns, and putting them together. Then putting that together with your other senses. So, I'm recognizing that in my scene, visual and auditory impressions. Maybe you're hungry, sensations, thinking. All those things are going together. And somehow presenting a mix of sensations to you. And then unifying it under a concept. In that last bit of unity, Hegel want to focus. Between you and your perception of something. Is really your categorization of that object as something. In short, what's in between you are not only a very complex pattern of synthesis but also in the end a concept, and that concept is what unifies things into an object. The idea is that, in between us and the objects in the world, are concepts. That's true of the objects of the matter. Also true of objects of the scientific image. All through conceptual activity. In that case, sensations as well, since we don't directly perceive them, isn't really there, it's all conceptual activity. The same thing is true from Russell's perspective. Theory of descriptions. The King of France. Doesn't connect us directly to an object in the world. It's just something general. There is exactly one object. In between us and objects are always concepts. Postmodernism take all these to a new step. The self. First, let's go back to Enlightenment. René Descartes. I'm gonna doubt everything I possibly can. But there's one thing I can't doubt. I think, I am. My very doubting is an act of thinking. So, I can't really doubt whether I think because the very doubt is a thought. Also, I can't doubt that I am. If I doubt that I am, who's doubting? Me, so, I must be. He concludes. I am a thing that thinks. That's essential to me, I am essentially a thing that thinks. But most important, self-knowledge. I know my own mind better than I know anything else. Like, could I be dreaming that I am or I think? No, because dreaming is a kind of thinking. I couldn't be dreaming unless I existed. I am given to myself more directly than anything else is given to me. Between me and an object. There might be some kind of active synthesis, some kind of concept. But between me and myself, the contents of my own mind, there's nothing. At least, I have access to my own mind. And the things that are going on there, I have access to directly. But there might be things that can interfere with your own self-knowledge. Like emotions, drugs, illness. But Descartes would say, no, actually at least in certain kinds of cases. Like when, I'm thinking that I think, or think that I'm. Nothing is in between. You're right there. You know yourself directly. And that's what the postmodernist denies. It's a mistake to think you have that kind of direct access to yourself, you don't. When you think about your own states of mind, you're using concepts in the same way that you use concepts apply to the outside world. If you're thinking about yourself as being clear-minded or confused. Like, when I had a car accident. People asked me, how do you feel? I kept saying, I'm fine. But in fact, I had no clue about what's going on. I thought I was clear-headed. But I had no perception of time passing. I was convinced I had called my wife. When I hadn't. So, there can be all sorts of things that interfere. Postmodernist says. Is a mistake to think that you have direct access to your own mind. Dissenting. Don't take for granted yourself. The self, have the same role it plays, as an object. And our access to it, our knowledge of it, is really no more direct. We can compare this with Wittgenstein. The limits of my language are the limits of my world. Postmodernists might agree. But also, they will say. You're not at the center of that world. You don't have access to yourself at the center. And the other things are revolved around you. And your language and thinking are not at the center. Dissenting. You don't have direct knowledge of any things, even yourself. The relation to yourself is mediated by concepts, language, and society. So, where do we get the concepts? The concept comes from language. Where the language comes from? From society. Jacques Derrida. He put postmodernism on the map. Deconstruction. Everything is a text. Language is a system of differences. My language will determine the limits of my world. Language establishes a structure, it's a system of these differences, of interrelated distinctions. But that's all it's capable of doing. That elaborates language as giving you a structure. All language can do, is give you a structure. It can't tell you any more about what those objects are. If that's right. There's no difference between fiction and non-fiction. All I'm doing is giving you a structure. How does that structure relate to reality? Relativism. No truths are absolute. Truths are social constructions. Depending on race, class, gender. And generally, power status. Skepticism. Objective knowledge is impossible. Postmodernism is the theory of rejecting theories. Tony Cliff. Logocentrism. Deny the thesis of reason. Logocentrism puts logic as the center of things. Reason is merely a tool. Only helps empowered people, and oppress other people. So, the emotions and experiences of the oppressed are the better guide for reality than anybody's reason. Postmodernism in incredulity towards meta-narratives, a story about stories. Lyotard. Liberation. Fight against oppression. By which the empowered retain his hegemony. What matters is being authentic and really feel it. Not reasons, that I have. Because reasons are just rationalizations. Postmodernism is the sense that the past is restricting, smothering, blackmailing us. Umberto Eco. They conclude. Everything is a social construction. Society give us language differences concepts objects. Arguments against postmodernism. Postmodernism itself refuting. Is the theory that you should reject theories. So. If logic is a tool of oppression, isn't that hypocritical? If every discourse is a tool of oppression, isn't postmodernism itself is a tool of oppression? It's just unintelligible. Fascist. If reason is a tool of oppression, can we argue and sort it out rationally? No, there's nothing to talk about. We all have to do is resort to power. Where there's no truth there's only power. Nietzsche. Quine. Relativist and skeptic. Even about the most basic questions of metaphysics, what is there? Everything, but there's room for disagreement over the cases. Postmodernism. Language is a system of differences. We can articulate structure, but not what it's the structure of. Quine, language what we refer to what we think there is radically indeterminate. At the end, he's just a radical relativist.